I don't have vivid memories of this because my memory isn't that great to start with, but I know somewhere along the way that I learned to ride a bike. What I do have vivid memories of was riding my big wheels. Now, if you grew up in the 90s, you are probably familiar with big wheels. They were these low-rider tricycles with big front wheels, hence the name Big Wheels. My siblings and I would race them down our driveway, well past the speed for which they were designed, and at well over the age for which they were intended. The benefit of the big wheels was that younger children were able to start riding a bike earlier than they would have been able to had they not had this low center of gravity, self-powered marvel. Also, they looked really cool, so that helped. In a family with two older brothers who modeled everything that was cool and desirable, I was itching at an early age to get behind the handlebars. Big wheels helped me get started. Now, somewhere along the way, I graduated up to a bike with training wheels, learning to steady myself a little bit higher off the ground. As I became more comfortable with my skills and abilities, I was able to remove the training wheels and start riding a big kid's bike. There was a logical progression there, right? I had to start at the beginning with my big wheels, I had to move to the training wheels, and I could move up and along from there. After changing the water into wine last week, Jesus and his disciples travel all around Israel. In fact, they travel around in such a strange way, bouncing from place to place in the span of time that only a jetpack could facilitate, that it becomes clear that the author of John is using the places that Jesus travels for symbolic purposes. For this reason, Jesus returns to the site of the sign that he performed last week. He returns to Cana in Galilee, where he turned the water into wine. He returns to the site of his first miracle in order to perform his second one. Elizabeth spoke last week a little bit about the power of signs in the Gospel of John. When John speaks about signs, he's referring to miraculous acts performed by Jesus. The Gospel of John highlights 7 of these signs, these wonders, with our passage today pointing out the second one. The signs which Jesus performs play a different role in this gospel as compared to the other 3. For John, the signs are not merely about miraculous things that Jesus did, or the wonderful ways that Jesus helped and aided his followers. They have a deeper meaning. They point beyond Jesus to the glory of God. These signs are aptly named. Think of the signs that you encountered on your drive here this morning. If you encountered a stop sign, the significance of that sign was not in how beautifully red or reflective it was, or how perfectly its 8 sides were aligned, though I'm sure they were. The significance of the sign was in the reality to which it pointed. You'd better stop here or you're probably going to hit someone. If you encountered a yellow upside-down triangle, you probably didn't marvel at its oddities or dig into the deep meaning of its contrasting yellow and black colors. That sign directed you to the reality of the world around you. When Barbara walked out of her house this morning, sure, she recognized the biology behind the tulip that was growing amongst the snow. But that tulip, that wonder, pointed to a deeper reality, the reality of God's presence at work in this creation. For John, this is the purpose of the signs which Jesus performs. They are not intended to be celebrated in a vacuum or to be left alone by themselves. They were performed, they were recorded, they were described in order to point to a truth about the nature of Jesus, to awaken Jesus' followers to the reality of Christ, the reality that God took on human flesh and came into this world. When Jesus turns the water into wine, the sign directs us to the nature of God as a God of overflowing abundance, who provides in the midst of our emptiness. When Jesus heals this royal official's son, the sign directs us to the nature of God as a God of healing, as a God of life, able to draw a child away from the brink of death, able to grant life, life to the fullest. In both of these stories, we see the powerful result of these signs. That result is faith. Jesus' followers awaken to faith not when they witness the sign itself, but when they recognize the power of God. They're not awakened merely by the wine or by the healthy boy, but by recognizing the source of these transformations. Because we don't have the privilege of traveling with Jesus in the body, we run the risk of missing this important distinction. One of the questions in my small group this last week was, can you remember a time when you experienced something you regard as a miracle? Reflecting on my own answer, I realized that I fell into the trap. I became amazed and preoccupied with the actual miraculous thing, with the actual sign, than I did with the meaning of that sign. It was easier to focus on how that thing had impacted my life, how it benefited me, than it was to recognize the power of God at work, to recognize the deep truths of God's presence. There is a moment in this story. It's a difficult moment when it comes to Jesus' sign. In verse 48, before he's made any promises or performed any signs, Jesus says, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." It comes across as such a negative statement. Some people think that Jesus is simply making an observation. These signs are necessary to awaken people to faith. Some people think Jesus is frustrated, considering the story of Thomas near the end of the gospel, when Jesus says, "Blessed are those who have seen and yet come to believe, who have not seen and yet come to believe." When I read this statement, though, and when I reflected on all that we know about signs, I'm drawn to the idea that Jesus is describing us different kinds or different levels of faith, describing to us different kinds or levels of faith. When Jesus performs his signs, the people are drawn to his power, to his identity, to the truth that he speaks. There's certainly some ambiguity, but it's hard to argue with jars of water turned to wine, with a long-distance healing, with thousands of people being fed off the lunch of one young boy. These are powerful, obvious signs that make the awakening to faith a smooth one. Yet, as we who never met Jesus in the flesh know, things are not always quite so easy. There are times when faith is challenged, when we find ourselves up late at night, doubting ourselves or God, asking, "Lord, please send me a sign, any sign," and hearing nothing in return. To stay faithful in those moments is the tougher stuff of faith. It's a lot like my bicycle experience. Early on, I rode my big wheels. It was easy, low to the ground, simple to control, navigate, and trust. This is faith received as a result of seeing signs, the tangible presence of God. Yet as I grew, as I matured, the going got tougher. Training wheels, big kid's bike, mountain bike, and road bike, all were higher and harder. Yet I had matured. My experience on big wheels gave me the strength, the knowledge, the trust to take on the tougher challenges. to learn how to conquer more than the driveway. Faith develops in such a way. When the rubber hits the road, when faith is challenged, when the evidence is not always there and the true meaning of faith is tested, a mature faith is needed. A faith that has the strength, knowledge, and trust of tangible signs to back it up. I think this is what Jesus is talking about. These signs are necessary for faith to be awakened within us. But he looks forward to a day, to a time when the training wheels come off, when people no longer need the signs to understand and trust in the power of God revealed in Jesus Christ. One of the amazing things about a community of faith, and one of the reasons a community of faith is essential, is because in this room, we have the broad spectrum of faith journeys sitting together, spread out on our journeys not only by our age, but by our maturity in faith. For when it comes to faith, age does not dictate one's progress on the journey. In this same room, we have those who still ride their big wheels, who marvel at God's tangible presence in their lives, who seek guidance from those around them, who turn to the stories and imagine, visualize Jesus traveling around Israel. We have those who wobble on their training wheels, for the first time encountering the deep pain and difficulty of life, knowing enough to ask the tough questions and hoping to find an answer that makes sense, filled with an excitement, a desire to truly know and understand. We have those mountain bikers and road bikers who navigate the ups and downs of life with poise, who know that the tough questions do not have easy answers, who do not need the tangible signs to believe, to have faith, to trust in God, who guide the others, who blaze the trails, who run the race in faith. All of these people are awakened to the reality of God's presence. All of these people join together in the mature guiding and modeling faith for the big wheelers, those on training wheels challenging the bikers and giving them energy, reminding them of the excitement of faith. All of us striving to know Jesus Christ, to rest in the comfort and knowledge of his grace. Where are you in your journey of faith? Are you hitting your stride on your road bike? Are you feeling wobbly on your training wheels? Are you just starting to get used to your big wheeler? No matter where we are in our faith journey, Jesus' call is to trust him, for us to awaken to the truth of God's presence, for us to see in his signs and wonders the truth of his reality, for us to taste and see that the Lord is good. Amen.